Well, hello. Welcome back, and I'm going to take a look at global infrastructure. The AWS Global Infrastructure is a topic all in of itself, so it's kind of separate from EC2, so I'm actually not going to stick this in my EC2 playlist. But if you're going through my EC2 stuff, just know that this does fall under regions and zones, which is covered in the EC2 section of the AWS documentation. However, because it is kind of a standalone topic, I'm going to cover it off completely independently. So why do you need to know global infrastructure? Well, this big long paragraph here can be summarized with this. It's the most secure, extensive, and reliable global cloud infrastructure for pretty much anything. And this is whether you're a startup or a large enterprise or whatever, you can go anywhere in the world with 25 different regions. They've got 5 announced coming, 80 availability zones with 12 more coming, 5 local zones, 13 wavelength zones for your mobile 5G networks. They've got twice as many regions as the next largest cloud provider, which we'll get into with the Gartner report, and I will go over the Gartner report for 2020 in here. 245 countries and territories, 97 direct connect locations, and 230 points of presence. That's 218 edge locations and 12 regional edge caches. We'll get more into this onto the direct connect and the edge locations on the network side. I'll probably cover that off in S3 actually, is where you'll see it first, and you'll find out why later. So this is the Magic Quadrant for Cloud Infrastructure as a Service. This comes out of the Gartner report. You'll hear about the Gartner Magic Quadrant quite frequently. It's a report that comes out every year. Here's the full report if you really want to see it. And it basically just shows market share. So if you've got, but in the context of 4 quadrants. So you can see you've got 4 quadrants: your niche players, your visionaries, your challengers, and your leaders. So your niche players, these are people that they kind of do a very specific thing. So Alibaba, Oracle, IBM, Tencent, there's a very specific use case for some of these things, especially Oracle and IBM. They do their own thing. SAP is probably going to be in there at some point in time if they keep building a mountain for themselves. The visionaries, these are the people that are kind of like going full bore, bleeding edge, constantly making new services. As you can see, Microsoft and Google have, Alibaba's way higher than it used to be, but Microsoft and Google are rapidly approaching AWS on the visionary side of the house, definitely on the leader side of the house. These would be considered the challengers. They don't have as much ability to execute, as you can see here. So like, you're not going to get the same level of service offerings from IBM as you would from Azure or GCP. But Amazon has been off on its own as a leader and visionary since the day cloud computing was a thing. So it's definitely, if you're looking at learning the cloud and you're here watching any of my videos on AWS, you're in the right place. I did spend a very large amount of time, about 3 years, working on GCP and AWS, and GCP is great. They've got a great product, but to me, there's just, as far as market share goes, and as far as, some people find it annoying, but the service offerings that Amazon offers, because you constantly have to keep up with it, there's just no comparison. It is getting, as you see, Amazon comes out with something, Google will come out with it again, or Google will come out with something and then Amazon will come out with their version. So it's kind of good to have that healthy competition, because I think it really, really helps bolster innovation. So we're seeing a lot of that in the IoT, machine learning, AI kind of spaces and stuff like that. So but yeah, that's kind of the Gartner Magic Quadrant as far as how it talks about how that relates to global infrastructure. This just kind of tells you where Amazon sits in comparison to their competition. So I love AWS, but I will say they love to talk about the Gartner report because they're just always right there up in the corner all by themselves leading the pack. So yeah, why wouldn't you brag a little bit, right? So here's the infrastructure map, so you can see the geographic regions and when they were launched. And not that you'll ever need to know that. If you go look at Virginia, it's 2006. I believe that's the oldest one. That's when AWS first came out. I think their first service was it EC2? I don't think it was EC2. Yeah, let's look it up. What was the first AWS service? It was something dumb, like a network thing or something like that. Was it EC2? Yeah, I guess it was SQS. Simple Queue Service. That's what it was. In 2004. Didn't need a whole region for that. So, but there you go. Little trivia for you. The very first service was SQS. So this is all in North America. You got the coming soon. They said that there's 5 coming soon. The more of these they build, the more availability zones you're going to get. The more availability zones you get, the more fault tolerance, high availability you'll be able to provide in your service or in your service area, and the closer you can get resources to your customers. So as you can see here, like having one in Hyderabad so close to Mumbai might not seem like a big deal, but when you consider how many people probably live here and what the latency must be like between Mumbai and Hyderabad, then it's probably pretty significant, I would imagine. They are definitely going to need a lot of resources in some of these areas. You can see Europe, it's very highly concentrated. Spain, Portugal, Italy, that whole area, even getting close to like Morocco and Egypt, having this Northern Africa availability there, it's going to be great, because getting the internet and cloud resources spread around the world is, from a humanitarian perspective, I personally think that's amazing. So I would personally like to see, some things maybe on the Ecuador side of the house, or over, in Central America, maybe hook Costa Rica up with something, or Peru, Argentina, let's go down south. Having one in Cape Town, South Africa is awesome. But if we could get one in Cameroon, or some of these other areas, I think that'll really help to deliver a lot of services to parts of the world that don't have these kinds of services available to them. So I think that AWS being a leader in the Gartner report in one way can be translated to it's a huge effort in and a huge success in, it kind of, as Thomas Friedman would say, is in flattening the world, right, and making the world as flat as possible, so that these resources are available to people that need them. So let me get off my soapbox. So what are the benefits of the global infrastructure? Well, first of all, you got security. It custom built for the cloud, designed to meet the most stringent security requirements in the world, 24/7, anytime, any place, anytime, right? The next is availability. I think that kind of goes without saying. We were just talking about that. Performance, also talking about having things closer, low latency, low packet loss, high overall network quality. They've got a fully redundant 100 gigabit Ethernet fiber network backbone. We talked about with using direct connects and things like that, where you can take advantage of using that network instead of traversing the internet. A global footprint. They have the largest global infrastructure footprint of any provider. Now, I will say, because I will shamelessly admit that I am a Google certified architect as well, and Google's network is badass, and it is fast. So they may not have the availability zones, but as far as speed and network quality goes, don't go walking around after you read all this thinking that AWS is the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, they are amazing, but just know that just because GCP doesn't have 25 availability zones doesn't make its network garbage, because it's not garbage. But AWS is going to give them a run for their money. I know Google's got tankers and freighters all around the world right now laying cable in the ocean. So this world is, if you think we're all connected now, you ain't seen nothing yet. This global footprint is going to grow. So as far as global infrastructure goes, AWS right now, they're kind of beating everybody. But yeah, keep an eye on that one. Scalability. Well, the more infrastructure you have around the world, the easier it is to scale because the more options you have. As you saw in my example, when I listed the availability zones I had used, that I could use in US West 1 in my previous regions and zones video, I only had US West 1B and 1C. I didn't get 1A. It's probably because the high population, so there's not enough room for me to go be provisioning resources there. It's good to know that because there are things you need to consider when you're talking about a well-architected framework, and one of them is scalability and availability. So if you're closest to the Northern California region, but there's only 2 availability zones for you, but your design is kind of set up in such a way that you need 3, well, then you shouldn't use US West 1. But if you go to US West 2 in Oregon, and they have, in my case, 4 availability zones, well, now I have a lot more options. So as far as scaling goes, if I was running an application, this is more probably toward availability, but if I was running an application that was using multi-AZ configuration and one of my availability zones went down, well, it's kind of hard to scale a database with a read replica across 2 AZs if your region only has 2 AZs and one of them goes down. So just know that that can have a significant impact on the performance of your application and whatever software you're providing. So knowing how to architect something and doing the research in advance to find out what's available to you is definitely something you want to consider before you start building stuff. All right, so gather your requirements. You know, where are my developers at? You'll know this better than anybody. Stand fast and gather those requirements, because you need to understand where you sit in the AWS Global Infrastructure. Because yes, they have a huge global footprint. Yes, there's AZs all over the place. You got regions everywhere. But your account is going to have different access than another person's account. So all this information isn't always universal, right? So if there's six AZs and I think there's 6 in Northern Virginia and US East 1, you might not have access to all 6. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then the last part is the flexibility. They give you the flexibility choosing how and where you want to run your workloads, and when you do, you're using the same network control plane, APIs, and AWS services. So if you want to run your stuff globally, you can choose from any other regions and AZs, keeping in mind what I said. And if you need to run your apps with single-digit millisecond latency, you can use local zones and AWS wavelength. Again, wavelength would be for the 5G stuff. Local zones would be for specific areas. There's only 5 of them, so I don't know that that's going to be a super popular option. Really what you're looking at is like using direct connects for things, and architecting things with like maybe a service-oriented kind of approach where you can use the AWS backbone for things like content delivery network. I've talked about that a lot in this video. So yeah, it just depends. If network is important to you, then you need to be provisioning instance types that allow you for low network latency. You need to have your services designed in such a way that give you the flexibility to have low network latency. If you don't care about network, then that's not an issue. If you need the flexibility to choose high memory capacity or high compute capacity or specific storage requirements, there's so many services in AWS, specifically within EC2 is what I've been talking about, but with pretty much all the services to get you what you need. I think it's almost impossible to find a gap in you know, they do exist. That's why they're always making these new services. But for, I'd say 97% of most use cases, business cases, you could pick 5 or 6 AWS services and build pretty much whatever the requirements call for. And then the other thing with flexibility is also using the AWS Outpost for doing colos on-prem, that kind of stuff. So anyways, so that's kind of a review of the AWS Global Infrastructure. I talked about regions, AZs, local zones, wavelength zones, regional services off in my regions and zones video. I didn't get too in-depth just because we kind of went over this, and the rest of it's kind of just reiterating things I've already said. Compliance and data residency is probably worth noting, and that as far as global infrastructure goes, if you have data residency requirements for like GDPR, for example, is a great example. You're going to be locked into certain areas of the world, and so you're going to need regions and availability zone options that are going to allow you to provide secure, redundant, highly available infrastructure with a limited geographic set of choices, right? So that's definitely something that is available to you should you need it. The other thing I'd probably go over is the sustainability and community engagement. So for sustainability, their goal is to have 100% renewable energy and to have a zero carbon footprint. So they're committed to running it that way. That's the way they do it. Let's see how they're doing. So in December, 26 new utility scale solar wind projects. In May of last year, 5 new renewable energy projects. So they have all kinds of stuff going on, right? So we're in 2021. Is this timeline going backwards? Yeah, that's kind of weird. Okay, so that was the last thing that they announced. If this is something, if sustainability is something that is important to you for your business or for you personally, this is definitely something that Amazon values. They invest a significant amount of time and money into their commitment to sustainability, and there's plenty of information in here that I don't need to go into as far as global infrastructure goes that supports that fact. Here you go, from 2019. Yeah, so they can perform the same task with an 88% lower carbon footprint. So if that's part of your operating model, it's part of your mission statement, part of who you are, your identity as a company. Another reason a lot of people pick these big cloud providers is because they can offer that. Google does the same thing. I don't know about Microsoft. I'm sure they do, but I don't know anything about them. So yeah, if you need information, it's all here. Reducing water, sustainability data initiative. They've got case studies on it, and there's a podcast which I subscribe to that has these nice little stories. They're positive. There's a lot of negative podcasts out there. It's a very positive podcast. Positive cast? I don't know. So yeah, fix this and check that out. You can add that to your list of podcasts that you subscribe to. And then the last part, and they've got all this stuff you can download too. The last part is community engagement. Go away. And the community engagement is more, it's like their outreach, right? So what are they doing to reach out to the community and get back instead of just make Jeff Bezos rich, right? So they sponsor STEAM events. They do workplace development, environmental stewardship, employee engagement, stuff like that. And you can learn a little bit more about each of these programs in their community engagement section. And they also have some global signature programs. There's a tech week that they do, which is a global initiative to help people kind of go through tech-related community events. They do, mapathons. I think one time they did what's that thing where you geocaching? That's kind of fun. I did that with my kids. That was super cool. Girls Tech Day, which I think is awesome. I've got 3 daughters, so I'm all about this. It seems like this make me feel good about using AWS because, they care about sustainability, they care about community engagement, and giving back. So as profitable as they are, they're still able to do a ton of great work in the communities, in local communities, and on the national stage as well. So there's a ton of stuff you can learn about it. This stuff's always changing. Parking lot Wi-Fi. Prince William County. Actually, I used to live right by here. So there's a lot of neat stories here, and you can get involved. You can get involved with them and work with them on things, and be a part of it. And it's just kind of, I think, useful to know, because it's one thing to try to dominate the globe, right, with your infrastructure, but it's also worth knowing that the level of sustainability and community engagement is definitely there. So that's just an overview of the global infrastructure. So if you ever hear anything about AWS Global Infrastructure, or somebody asks you about it in a job interview, or you're taking an exam for a certification or something, there's your global infrastructure. It basically covers regions, everything in a region all over the world, and what you can do with them, and how they control those with their sustainability model, and staying involved with the community. So that's it for global infrastructure. I hope you learned something, and I definitely recommend checking out the podcasts and reading some of the articles. They're great to share with if you have corporate social responsibility programs, CSR programs with HR, or with whoever in your company runs those programs. Those are very, very good stories, resources, things you can share to kind of help people get excited about the cloud, and get excited about being a part of working in the cloud, and to not feel dirty by spending all of your days staring at a screen that was built by Amazon or Google or Microsoft or whatever. So it is what it is, folks, right? So anyways, global infrastructure. There you have it. Ta-da!